Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. The Revs are wrapping up a successful week where they took all 6 points in a 2-match week. They opened the week with a 4-0 win against the Vancouver Whitecaps, which saw a beauty of a goal from Gustavo Bou on his debut. And then the week ended with a 2-0 win in the Revs' first trip to Cincinnati, a game which New England controlled throughout. The Revolution are now 10 games unbeaten in MLS action since the firing of Brad Friedel. They have won 5 of their last 7 MLS matches, which is since Bruce Arena took over, and they are currently occupying the 7th and final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference standings. Joining me today, I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today is Jake Catanese of the Bent Musket. Jake, how's it going?
Finally, the Yukon Huskies are back in the Big East. We're tired of your shit, Providence. We're coming for you.
Yes, we haven't had you on in a while, so that might be a little bit of old news, but that you've had that pent up. And as someone who was a mini pack ticket holder for PC basketball, I actually am excited about the PC Yukon basketball rivalry reigniting. So you won't miss the civil conflict with UCF at all, Jake?
That is actually still one of my favorite subplots of our friends at the Yukon blog of SB Nation. They are actively trying to find out where the trophy is so that they can buy it.
Yeah, good. Happy hunting. I'm sure it was. It's probably still sitting in that locker room. Also joining me today, we're doubling down on the Bent Musket on the podcast today. Joining us right after an intense CrossFit workout, it's Seth Macomber. Seth, welcome back to the podcast. It's been a while.
Hey, thank you. Are we going to talk soccer today, or is it going to be about basketball or whatever sport you guys are talking about?
Well, we're getting the Yukon out of the way. Jake has it in his contract. We need to talk about Connecticut at least once at some point in the podcast. And we're also just being nice to him because there's probably going to be a bunch of Bo puns throughout our podcast today. And that's just going to drive him absolutely nuts.
We have not yet reached critical mass on those yet. Yet being the opportune word. I don't know when it's happening. Might be another week. Might be a little bit into August, but get it all out of your systems now. I will return to full, Bo, booing, whatever form here shortly.
Yeah, are they saying Bo or are they saying boo?
Yes, exactly.
That didn't even occur to me until just now. Thank you for that one, Jake.
No, that one was... I was actually looking for the Montgomery Burns.
The GIF, yeah.
And I was hoping that someone would supplant one Mr. Different M. Burns onto that meme, but no one's done that yet. Shame on you, Revs hashtag. I'm disappointed.
I'm terrible at Photoshop, so I got to step my meme game up. But Jake, as the most tortured soul through all the Bo puns, why don't you start us off? What's your key takeaway from this week in these past 2 matches for the Revs?
I think for me it was that 2 very different lineups showed up and won games, and to be fair, dominated games, which is something we haven't seen New England do. You have a bad team at home in Vancouver and a bad team on the road in Cincinnati, and Bruce Arena comes out with 2 very distinctively different lineups and setups and decides one day I'm going to have Bo as like a roving 10, the other one I'm going to have him as a set striker. Diego Fagundes is now a holding midfielder. Carlos Gil can play out wide on the wing. Nothing Bruce Arena has done or said in the last couple of weeks prepared us for perhaps the combinations of midfields that we saw. And I think they played similar yet different. And I think midweek, I think it was Bobby Warshaw and Matt Doyle were talking about what formation were the Revs going to play. They were thinking, 4-1-4-1, 4-3-3, stay with the 4-2-3-1, and they both thought at the end of the day it doesn't matter because the way the Revolution are setting up and the way that they're passing and possessing the ball with purpose has been a revelation under Bruce Arena, and we just saw 2 different ways of it lead to 6 points this week.
I thought it was just so interesting because we've seen Arena throw out so many different lineups, personnel-wise, but also just like the way it's set up. He just hasn't found necessarily the way he wants to set this team up, which makes a lot of sense because I can't imagine he was doing a lot of in-depth analysis of the Revs before he got the job here. So it's kind of cool to watch a coach think about on the fly how he's going to put his pieces together and not only think about it, but continue to get results. So it really speaks to the quality of coach that Bruce Arena is. When Bou came in, I highly expected him to play on the left-hand side because it just made sense that way. And we did see that midweek. But we saw him play out wide but float inside quite a bit and roam everywhere. Like, yes, his starting point was that left-hand side, but he wasn't playing the left-hand side like a Pania would. He was coming in quite a bit. And then later in the game, we saw him go to the right-hand side, and we saw him in the middle. So it was really cool to kind of see Arena play with those pieces so well and still get results. And, of course, the second game of the week, we saw Bou play more as a number 10. And then we saw Carlos Gil play as a right midfielder, but really never occupy that, like, wide right area. He was more kind of floating inside and being that attacking player, which allowed that space for Bou to overlap. So it's just kind of cool that, like, we're seeing, a talented soccer mind at work. And not only is he trying to figure out what works best for his team, but he's still getting results. I mean, we see so often, hey, trust the process. I don't know if anyone watches the U.S. men's national team. The idea of, trust the process. We have to put these things together. We're seeing development as we go, which is great. I'm making that as a joke. You can't really probably compare these situations that well. But to see Bruce Arena come in and play with his lineup and try different tactical, makeups and put players in different places and challenge them, Diego Fagundes playing that further back role, it was kind of cool to see him do that and still get results.
Yeah, and I'll kind of tack on to what you said there about Diego is that my initial reaction to Gustavo Bou coming into the side is that he can do a lot of things really well, and Carlos Gil can also do a lot of things really well. So, this isn't necessarily a situation where we have one guy playing in the center and one guy playing on the wing and the other guy playing on the wing. I think we're going to see a lot of rotation and a lot of different matchups where, sometimes Bou will be out on the wing, and then other times they'll put in Pania on the wing, and Bou will be playing a little bit more centrally. As you said, he'll play it a little bit more on the right side against Cincinnati. That's a little bit of a different role than we saw earlier in the year. Diego moving back a little bit, similar to kind of what Juan Agudelo has been doing recently. Although I think that might be not to skip ahead to our Twitter questions, but I think that might be a little bit more because of the matchup and because FC Cincinnati is more or less a glorified USL squad. I think they're a little bit able to kind of get away with more of an offensive lineup than anything else. But regardless, I think there's so much flexibility that Bruce Arena can put out a lineup of 4 or 5 really dangerous attackers and not get burned for it. So I'm not totally sure if there's going to be a set lineup going forward, but there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of fluidity, and there's a lot of people who are dangerous, not just in the lineup but on the bench. So it'll be really interesting to see how the pieces come together and how Bruce Arena makes it work. And so far, he's passing with flying colors. So. Seth, do you want to go over to your key takeaway from this game?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that we're seeing that this team can be dangerous on set pieces. I mean, for such a long time, Revs would get corner kick after corner kick or free kick after free kick and really not be able to do anything with them. And this week we saw the midweek game, we saw that outstanding Bou strike. And it wasn't by accident. I mean, Bou recognized there was space there. He comes back. Carlos Gil yells to him. Bou yells back, and they make that connection immediately. He hits that wonder goal, and that was great to see. And then we see a more traditional type of goal in the second game where Gil plays a short corner kick. He gets the ball back from Pania, and then Delamea, being a dominant force, scores a header, which I believe is his second header of the year, off of a set piece. So it's kind of cool to see that this team actually can score on set pieces now. And I think it just comes down to the quality of Gil. I mean, Gil is a player who sees the game faster than anyone else on the field. Now, you saw that earlier this year, and I was concerned earlier this year under Friedel because the players weren't making the right runs to get on the end of Gil's balls. Like, you could tell he was doing all this work. He'd get the ball, he'd play a through ball, but the players weren't making the right runs to do that. Now they're getting in the right positions to receive a ball, get in behind, do all these magical things. And we also see that, smartness on set pieces. He's willing to take a quick set piece. He's willing to play a 1-2 with a player. He's willing to, play it to a player who can then hit a shot from the top of the box. There's all different types of way that Gil can see the game. So it'll be interesting to see if we continue to see the Revs be an attacking threat. I mean, we know that, of course, the Hebo has that height, but Delamea is also a guy who has a lot of passion. Can they continue to be that attacking threat on set pieces? And if so, that's a pretty dangerous team.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. And usually the Revs and their fans are kind of used to being on the other end of set pieces. I know we had it seemed like a 5 or 6 game stretch where set pieces were a complete disaster for him. But yeah, that goal with Bou on Wednesday night, where I guess it was on the fly. I guess that wasn't a planned play. It certainly looked planned, where Gil kind of chips it and Bou volleys it into the net. They certainly are very dangerous, and even the play against Cincinnati where De La May heads it home, it looked more of a drawn-up play. When you have a guy like Carles Gil, it's very dangerous, and he can really put a ball wherever he wants it to. That kind of leads into my key takeaway, and that is that Carles Gil should be on the MLS All-Star team. I understand why he was left off at the time. I don't think he was on the score sheet a lot. I think MLS didn't think he was contributing a whole lot just looking at his score sheet, and he has really made up a lot of ground, and I think that they need to retroactively add him to the team. He has 7 goals and 7 assists on the season. That includes 3 goals and 3 assists in the last 4 games. He had a goal and assist in each of the 2 games this week. Since Bruce Arena took over, he has 3 goals and 6 assists in 7 games, and there's only 1 game where he's been held without a point. So he is making an impact on every single game, and I think he's going to be dangerous going forward. It's not unreasonable to think that he's going to maybe not get an assist every game, but he's going to be torching defenses more and more, because I found in the last 2 games he had a little bit more space. I think having Gustavo Bou on the field, especially against Cincinnati, in the 50th minute, that was the Carles Gil shot that was just wide of the post. If you watch that play, Gustavo Bou has a marker, and Gustavo Bou kind of moves out of the space in the center of the field, and it opens wide up, and Carles Gil is completely unmarked. And so I think having Gustavo Bou on the field, he's going to be taking away defenders. He's going to be a guy that needs to be marked at all times, and I think that's going to really open things up for Carles Gil, who at the beginning of the season I think was frustrated, and he didn't have quality finishing at the beginning of the season, as he said, Seth. So I think that Gustavo Bou is going to be a major impact player, but don't forget Carles Gil, and I think he's going to fill up the stat sheet more than we realize.
So I will say that Carles Gil has been excellent for this team. He's probably one of the best. I mean, you can go through all the stats right now. He's leading the league in a lot of different categories. I'm not sure exactly all the categories off the top of my head because I saw him earlier because of Sean. I will say I don't agree with the idea that he should be an all-star. This also comes from Sean Donahue. He said that when the voting began, he had 4 goals and 2 assists, and the Revs were at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And that to me is the All-Star Game is a popularity contest. Let's be honest. And yeah, we saw the quality of Carles Gil at that point, and some people were picking up the quality of Carles Gil. But with 4 goals and 2 assists, and our team that does not get a lot of TV time nationally, does not get a lot of press nationally, I just don't think he should have been an All-Star. Now, it would be great to have him be a part of that expanded roster so we can get that bonus. I'm sure he has some sort of bonus on there if he's on the All-Star game. But, when the voting began, he wasn't an All-Star. To be fair, it wasn't his fault because the pieces around him weren't there. But I think that there was better options out there. And also, the All-Star game just kind of like these big-name players. Like, you want to see Zlatan, you want to see Wayne Rooney, you want to see those types of guys because that's kind of the fun event it is. Yeah, you want to see a talented guy like Carles Gil be, marketed and put him out there as this is a guy who plays for the Revolution. That's a great thing. But I think it's more of something for next year to aim for, now that he has those pieces around him, Bruce Arena as his coach. But I just don't see that he should be in this year's All-Star game because when the voting began, he wasn't necessarily putting up those numbers. That said, I know Wilfred Zahibo was a part of the team last year, so
stealing my joke.
Yeah. Who knows who actually is going to make these types of rosters? But I'm totally fine with him not having been on this, being on this roster, especially because it's all about the Revs making the playoffs this year. And does he need to play in this meaningless friendly? No, I don't think so.
No, he doesn't need to, but I think retroactively, I think now that it was like he had the skill, but he didn't have the numbers to back it up. And as I say, I think retroactively, I think we need to get a petition going. I think it's just the moral correct thing to do, Seth. He needs that recognition, just like how Wilfred Zahibo had his recognition last year. I know that Carles Gil is not of a big name as Wilfred Zahibo, As he said, you want the big names, and Zahibo certainly. You couldn't walk around Boston without seeing a Wilfred Zahibo jersey. I know, but I think Carlos Gil definitely earns some recognition, and all your points are true. Earlier in the season when voting opened, the numbers really weren't there. Unless you were in New England, you didn't really understand the season he was having. So all very, very valid points. But Jake, you want to come in and play referee and give a grade on who's correct here?
No. I mean, I think everyone's correct. The All-Star game that I preferred it to be at the beginning of the DP era, where it was still a lot of U.S. national teamers and good MLS veteran types with a few David Beckhams and those types. Now it's just every big DP makes more than $5 million. That's the game. If you actually want to win the game, if you actually want to go out and show Atletico Madrid that the league is actually good, you put Carlos Gil in this roster. Not only that, you probably start Carlos Gil, maybe even holding midfield. It doesn't matter. He's going to be awesome. He's going to make those players around him better. If you want to go out and sell a whole bunch of tickets and put Wayne Rooney at left striker with Carlos Vela and Zlatan and whatever it is and have no one protecting the back line and just 6 attackers and 3 center backs or whatever the roster is, go ahead and do that. That's fine. If you're actually trying to build a roster to win the game, you take guys like Gil, you take guys like Zahibo, you take guys like Dax McCarty, and players like that who are like, well, these are the best players in the league? No, but we're trying to showcase the league, not just the money we spend on it, or the high DP players that get spent on it. So that's my whole take. If you're actually trying to win the game, let me know. I'll be far more interested. Until then, #Attleboro for Atletico.
That also brings another question. I have a bit of a hot take, and you guys can shout me down if you want. I know that they typically bring in a team to have a friendly. MLS, in my opinion, has grown to the point where I think they can go to an East-West game, or maybe do what the NHL did back in the day, where you do a North America versus World type game. And I think that too expands all-star rosters by 2. I think it promotes the league a little bit more. It gets more big names involved in the game as opposed to a meaningless friendly, like you said, Jake. Would you guys support maybe an East-West game?
Yeah, totally. I'm a little bit over the idea of bringing in a foreign team, especially this year with Atletico Madrid. The game still has tickets for sale, in Orlando, and this is supposed to be something that usually sells out. That's supposed to be exciting, and Atletico Madrid doesn't necessarily have that same star power as a Manchester United or Chelsea or something like that. So to me, I'd rather see it be a little bit more fun to have it East versus West, and to have defense optional type of thing. Let's show off some of the talent. Let's bring on the nutmeg. Let's see, we're going to see the skills competition this year, which I think is awesome, which I think that Carlos Gil would actually be really good at if he was invited to that portion of it. So I think that part's fun, but to me, the All-Star game itself has lost its muster a little bit. I think it'd be more fun to have East versus West, or the other thing that's been thrown out is MLS versus Liga MX. I think that'd be kind of fun to see as well. So, yeah, I'd like to see the format change. I think that's a kind of a popular sentiment that's out there right now.
I wouldn't mind seeing both games. Why not do an East-West in November, like right around Thanksgiving, like the week before MLS Cup or something like that?
Do a Pro Bowl type event.
Yeah, exactly. And just say, like, hey, right before or even during one of the international breaks, just go, like, hey, we're going to get everyone together. We'll have 2 team practices and just have a kick around, and then when you have a game that's like 7-6, no one cares. But I think you could actually, that would be another interesting way to sort of showcase things of, hey, it's the end of the year. Maybe we don't have some of the guys from LAFC or Tom Brady of the Patriots or whatever because they're playing in the Super Bowl or MLS Cup, but you can still have a way to showcase East versus West. You don't have to do it in the middle of the year either.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that I didn't consider, and yeah, I'm kind of over the friendly, like you said, Seth. I don't even really watch it anymore. I think I'd much prefer to see an East-West team where I get to see some stars from the West a little bit more than I currently do. But going back to Jake's point about the best players not necessarily being at the All-Star game, we need to talk about another guy that you need to have on your team if you want to win the All-Star game, but is not going to the All-Star game. And that, of course, is Matthew Turner. 2 clean sheets for Matt Turner this week. He had 7 saves in the game against Cincinnati, which brings him to a total of 7 saves this week. Guys, Matt Turner, I think it's pretty solid that he's the number 1 going forward. And of course, MLS Team of the Week, 2 clean sheets gets you on MLS Team of the Week. I believe it's the first time this season. I think it's his second time on Team of the Week overall. Do you guys have any thoughts on Matt Turner? And is there any doubts in your mind that he's not the number 1 going forward anymore?
Yeah, he's clearly number 1 as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's been my take from the beginning. Even last year when he was benched, I don't necessarily believe that was the right move. I understand why that happens. You give like a young guy a little bit of a rest and say, why don't you focus yourself? But I remember back in the day, Kevin Hartman, MLS legend goalkeeper, said, with a goalkeeping position, it's all about getting those reps and working through those bumps. And if you throw me on the bench, I don't get those reps. And I don't get that experience, and my confidence starts to go down. And you just have to you pick a guy and ride with him. It's different from like a field position where a guy's going through a cold spell, but you put him on the bench and bring him on in the 80th minute to see if you can get him out of that rut. If you're Matt Turner, you're now on the bench. You're not getting any reps. Yeah, you're getting practice, but that's totally different. What Matt Turner needs now is more games. He needs to work on his distribution. He needs to work on, commanding his box on crosses. He is an athletic freak. He's very, very good at shot stopping, very good at making those acrobatic saves that back in the day Matt Reese could do. I always remember the debate between Matt Reese and Bobby Shuttleworth. Bobby Shuttleworth was really good about his positioning and getting in the right spots overall. He could make an athletic save here and there, but Matt Reese was the type of guy that out of nowhere made a save that you didn't expect him to make. And that's where I see a little bit of that Matt Turner, that you don't expect him to make a save and then he does it. Does he still make mistakes? Sure. Is there things that get better? Yeah, absolutely. But you're talking about a guy who spent most of his life not playing soccer, And so I think you have to ride with him. I mean, at this point, does Brad Knighton give you anything that Matt Turner doesn't? He gives you a little bit of experience, but he's not going to be a long-term option for this team. And Cody Cropper, I think that it's pretty clear that he's not the prospect, at least within the Revs, that you'd hope to see. And obviously, you might have heard a little bit of the rumor. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about this, but we might have heard about this rumor of a Orange County goalkeeper leaving that club, Patrick McLean, and heading over to maybe the Revolution, and maybe there being movement within the goalkeeping ranks that way. But I don't see that. If this player does come in, I don't see that as a threat for Matt Turner. For me, it's Matt Turner going forward, with Brad Knighton being that reliable veteran who can step in and provide some experience and provide some starts.
Yeah, and I just want to touch upon the Patrick McLean rumor, Seth, which I think you have. I actually tweeted that out because I was kind of following it last week. A couple of rumor Twitter accounts kind of indicated that there was some interest that the Revs had in this goalkeeper, and I did not pay a whole lot of attention to it. And then 2 days later, he was released, and there's a podcast by Orange County supporters that kind of indicated that there are a number of MLS teams interested in McLean, including the Revolution. That would seem to imply to me that they would move a keeper. I can't imagine the Revs sign a 4th goalkeeper. But I mean, it's been 3 or 4 days now. I was under the impression that it would be a quick moving type of thing. So I'm not sure if that will materialize, but that's the full story in case you did not see it. And Seth, I remember you tweeted on Friday that you checked and he can't play center back, which it's not a need that the Revolution, it's not a priority for them, because even if you have Turner as a first team keeper, as a number 1 goalkeeper, Brad Knighton is a number 2, and I certainly think that a lot of people would argue that Cody Cropper is a number 2. Some people still think Cody Cropper should get a second chance at the keeper position. But Jake, let's kick it over to you. You have any thoughts on Matt Turner and his 2 clean sheet week?
No, I said earlier yesterday during the game, I believe Seth had something on. Matt Turner, should basically be the starter for the next X number of years, being that he's, young, and you should let him work through those spells as you let Bobby Shuttleworth work through some of those spells. And 2014 Bobby Shuttleworth was, arguably one of, the best goalkeepers in the league. And maybe he can't maybe Bobby couldn't replicate that form, but he could certainly get to that level. And I certainly see Turner being a player like that. Like, you know what? He's going to be pretty consistent, and he can go on a tear where he's just going to be that good. And he is going to save you of games. And I think against Vancouver, he didn't have to, do a whole lot, save an own goal, I think, at one point. But against Cincinnati, like, these were two games that, New England struggled to put away. And you need the goalkeeper to, anchor and hold on to your leads as best they can. You don't have the second goal against Cincinnati until the 55th minute. That game's still, not in doubt. You don't get the final 3 goals in Vancouver till the 80th, 82nd minute. So, neither of these games are really closed out until Matt Turner and the defense stamp their authority on the game and close it out. And I don't think either of those two games were something where I'd write and go like, yeah, those were sure wins. We had that locked down start to finish. Yeah, they played pretty well. They possessed the ball really well. They attacked really well. But at the same time, it wasn't like, Matt Turner had a lot to do in that Cincinnati game. He's got 7 saves. That's a lot of shots on target for a team that's supposed to be bottom of the East and is bottom of the East. I know it was 0 official saves against Vancouver, but I feel like he had more big moments in the Vancouver game because the bulk of it was 1-0. And I feel like that's important because, New England for several months this year were losing 2 or 3 to nothing. And you didn't notice Matt Turner's contribution as much because it didn't matter. The defense was so bad, the goals were going in so often. And it's nice to see that a confident Matt Turner, is back and the whole Mike Lapper, you're my guy comment. I still think that could be the moment of the year for the Revs. Yes, signing Arena. Yes, signing Bou. But, Mike Lapper, after, firing head coach, going, hey, Matt, I'm putting you in goal. You're my dude.
Guys, I just have to mention, in 2014, the Revs had 4 goalkeepers on the roster. That is when they sent Louis Softner to the Rochester Rhinos and brought in Larry Jackson. So if you are a Revs fan and remember Louis Softner and Larry Jackson, then you win some sort of prize, I'm sure. Sean will give it to you next week.
That is, I believe that's former Chivas GOAT Larry Jackson as well. R.I.P. Zombie Goats.
I believe Chivas is also a former team of Patrick McLean's. So there's a number of comparisons going along here. I also am hoping that we get a Patrick McLean signing, even if it's just as a fourth keeper, and keeping along with the Simpsons jokes, just because I want to make a lot of McLean jokes. So that's what I'm hoping for. And while we're talking about fourth keepers, I wish Sean was here because he would correct me. I'm pretty sure Matt Turner was kept on a roster as a fourth goalkeeper at one point when they were loaning him down to Richmond. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I remember one year the season ended and I expected Matt Turner to be released, and they kept him. I think it was the year they kept Shuttleworth as well. I think they had Cropper, Knighton, Shuttleworth, and Matt Turner, and I had no idea why they kept. Once Cropper was signed, they had 4 keepers, and I figured that meant Matt Turner was the guy out because he was unknown, and Matt Turner went from fourth keeper to now one of the premier keepers in MLS.
Yeah, what was the first year they signed Cropper? Was that 2016 late?
That was 2016, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, late in 2016. Yeah, right. There were 4 keepers.
Yep, there you go.
Also, Larry Jackson never played for Chivas USA. He was only a trialist. So if you actually think that Jake knows a lot about Larry Jackson, he doesn't. Just saying.
Whatever. I got to say R.I.P. Zombie Goats, which is that's my whole goal with Chivas. That's all I care about.
This is how in-depth of a podcast we are. We're getting contentious over Larry Jackson. This is pretty amazing. Yes, it also should be noted, too, that Matt Doyle pointed out about the Patrick McLean rumor that McLean and Bruce Arena's time did overlap a little bit, I think, at Chivas. And so there is a bit of a connection. Bruce Arena is familiar with him, and Cody Cropper and Patrick McLean follow each other on social media, so they might be buddies. So just saying, I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I have no sources or anything like that, but it does seem that there are some ties to the Revs in some sort of fashion. That being said, McLean is 30. I can't imagine him dethroning Turner as the starter. I have no idea why the Revs would be interested in him. But anyway, enough about Patrick McLean. Let's move on to the one other player that was on the team of the week. That was Andrew Farrell. Obviously, no goals conceded by the Revs. A lot of credit goes to Matt Turner. Also, a lot of credit goes to that Revs defense and that back line. A lot of people, including me and Sean, were a little suspect about Farrell moving from right back to center back. We thought that was kind of out of need. Well, Michael Mancienne has been 100% healthy, according to a bunch of videos the Revs put out last week. Mancienne has not made the 18. Julian Laney Baba has kind of been moved to the bench in the interim, and Andrew Farrell is still at center back, which implies to me that he is a starting center back for this team going forward, which is a bit of a surprise to me. I figured he'd move right back to right back when they were fully healthy in that area. So that being said, he made the team of the week. Jake, I'll go to you first. Is Andrew Farrell now a center back?
In my heart of hearts, I'll always answer no to this question because 2015 pissed me off that much. I will say this, that I do somehow think currently the Revs' best center back pairing might be Farrell and De La Mea. I don't know why this is. I feel like somehow De La Mea as a passer and an organizer is fine. Andrew Farrell gets to bicycle clearance things because he can, and it works. I think it also works because Brandon Bye hasn't had to defend a lot the last 2 games, and the overall the backline cohesion, platooning Castillo and Jones on the left side, the other 3 guys playing consistent. I think now that Arena's here and the unit as a defense is steady, and I think it's a better understanding of what the rest of the team is doing, makes that unit that much stronger. I wish that a center back would be brought in so that Andrew Farrell could go back to the right-hand side, and then you could do things like use Jones off the bench to cause chaos late in games, which you can do with Jones as well or Buchanan. But I feel like I don't think Brandon Bye is a starter at that position, and I think that Andrew Farrell is still your best starting option there, because then it allows the left side to do the overlapping as opposed to Brandon Bye doing it, though he was very effective these 2 games against bad teams. No, I as much as I love Andrew Farrell, and Andrew Farrell will go to war with anyone, just tell him where to go on the field, I still think his best spot's right back.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we're seeing some tendencies where players will run in front, like run a diagonal in front of Andrew Farrell, and he won't pick up that. There was one against Vancouver, and their rookie, 19-year-old rookie forward, Blair, something like that, comes in front of him, and he then takes a one-time shot, and it ends up hitting the post. I mean, that's a run that you have to mark if you're a center back. So I do still think we're seeing some of those tendencies that he's not picking up on as a center back. That said, he's doing the job right now, and I wouldn't move him. I mean, again, Sean Donahue posted some stats that I didn't see that basically showing that he'd be better off playing the right back position over Brandon Bye, who I don't necessarily think is a good fit in that right back position spot. But he's doing the job. I think one of the cool things that I'm seeing out of Andrew Farrell this year is he's becoming a leader. And you saw after some goals that he's bringing like the guys together and saying like, hey guys, this is what we need to do. And he's rallying people and he's talking to referees. And it's really become clear that he was always one of those guys that as a reporter you could go talk to after a win, after a loss. It didn't matter. He's going to give you some real honest answers. So he's always that type of guy. But I feel like we're seeing him become that chiseled veteran right now. So I wouldn't really switch things right now. I mean, a 10-game unbeaten streak is great, especially with De La Mea coming back. Him and those 2 in the middle, I think, are very solid options that I wouldn't necessarily mess with right now. But I think going forward, you're probably going to see him move back to right back. He works really well there, has the speed. He was working on his crosses. His crosses got better, in the later parts where he was over there as opposed to earlier in his career. But right now, keep him there.
Yeah, and you guys have kind of said what we've said in the past, where we think Andrew Farrell is more of a right back than a center back. But I think he's doing better than he did in 2015. Jake, you mentioned the season where he was trying. They converted him. I think he's doing a better job now than he was then, and he's certainly being a competent center back. So this is something that over time I think I'm being won on more and more and more. And we'll see where it goes and if they ever move him out. But I mean, I kind of expected some rotation. I maybe thought on Wednesday that they would slide him over to right back or sit him and just kind of rotate guys in and out. We did see a rotation of 4 new players in the lineup in Cincinnati, but Andrew Farrell was not one of them. He played both games start to finish at center back and did pretty well. No goals conceded. So it should also be noted that as much crap as we give the defense, they have, I believe it's 0.8 goals against allowed in the last 11 games. So their defense is on fire since the firing of Brad Friedel. They certainly have some difficult games coming up, so it'll be interesting to see if their defense reverts back to its original form or if they're able to keep the hot streak going. So Just a couple of other players I want to kind of touch on. You guys can jump in if you have any thoughts, but Christian Pinilla is kind of back in form after a slow start to the season. He had 2 assists against Vancouver off the bench. He has 3 assists in his last 4 appearances and 1 goal and 4 assists in his last 7 appearances. So he seems to be doing well. He certainly made his presence felt against Cincinnati. And then the other person I wanted to mention is that we're giving a lot of compliments to this team. There's a lot to be positive about. Juan Fernando Caicedo had a bit of a difficult game on Wednesday. 2 really, really nice chances that were not finished. That's the only reason he's there. It's the 9. And I was listening to Extra Time Radio earlier today, and Charlie Davies was on the podcast. And he said something to the effect of, I think Caicedo is done. And so I don't know if he has any inside information, but I think Caicedo's performance on Wednesday, we might see some limited minutes from him going forward. And also we were talking about kind of the flexibility of each player. Caicedo is really not flexible. He can really kind of only play up top and finish chances. So I'm interested to see if we see any more of him in the future or what his situation is. So.
I also listened to Extra Time Radio earlier today, and let's remember that Charlie Davies' best friend is Teal Bunbury. And Charlie Davies totally believes that Teal Bunbury is best as a number 9, which, to be fair, Teal Bunbury is absolutely on a streak right now. He is doing very, very well. I think you could play him on the wing. You could play him up top. I think he's honestly been doing better on the wing because he has that speed. And I think we saw that, how he can use that in that play where, as the number 9, Caicedo jumps up and flicks that ball onto Teal Bunbury, who then runs in behind and scores a great goal. I think that Teal Bunbury can play as a 9 as well. We saw that in the later part of the Vancouver game where he receives the ball and then has a turn and scores a goal. So personally, I agree that probably at this point, Fernando Caicedo goes back to the bench, especially with all this attacking talent around. I mean, if Pinilla's doing well, you want to try to get him out there. That also opens up. You also have Bou that's out there now, Carlos Gil that's out there. Okay, where do we put Teal Bunbury, who, yes, did not score against Cincinnati, but has played very well. Okay, you put him at the 9. But I honestly don't think this is the last we see of Jay Caicedo because he has the skills you want to see from a number 9. Is he quick enough? No. Is he sharp enough? No. But he has those types. I mean, even against that game against Cincinnati, he makes the right run to get in behind, and then he's like too slow with the ball, and the chance doesn't work out. So he has those skills that you want as a pure number 9, and I don't think that Teal always has those skills as a pure number 9. He doesn't always bring the ball down as cleanly as you like. He doesn't always, hold the ball up as cleanly as you like. So I can see games where they're like, you know what, we're going to play Caicedo as a number 9. All he's going to do is battle with center backs, try to win the ball, and then try to, connect with these other types of players. And I think that in the game against Vancouver, we saw some really nice interplay between Caicedo and Bou and Heel and Bunbury. Some nice passing that was happening. I've kind of made that my hill to die on, that Caicedo is, Jay Caicedo is not as bad as people think he is because he has certain skills. I'm not a huge fan of him by any means, but I think that there's a talent there and there's natural instincts there that make me understand why they brought him in. Early on this season, during preseason, I was like, what is this? This guy just runs funny. What's the deal with this guy? Yes, he runs funny. Yes, he falls down a lot, but he has some of those skills that you want to see. He just has to be sharper. He has to be cleaner, which, probably is not going to happen this year. And, as far as I'm concerned, even if he goes on this giant tear, he's not coming back next year because he's making, pretty substantial money and he's on loan. But I think there's games where he can still come in and potentially do a job for his team.
Yeah, it's not so much that we hate. I don't hate JFC the player. I hate JFC the contract. I think JFC is going to be a valuable asset to the Revs down the stretch, even if that's off the bench as a true target 9, just closing out games. The Revolution have really lacked great options to close out games, and in the last couple of days, you've seen, because of the versatility and depth that they now have, Pinilla coming off the bench, causing havoc. JFC coming off the bench, getting fouled a whole bunch of times, slowing down the game. Scott Caldwell coming in and doing Scott Caldwell things, as he's been doing the past couple of months. I wish we could get Scotty some starting minutes, but that's a different argument.
He's pretty solid in 1 minute that he comes in at the end of the game.
Yeah, but Diego was so good at the kind of sort of 6 role that it didn't really matter. I was like, well, you could have put Scotty in 10 minutes earlier, but Diego's doing really well. But I look at now, Arena's now, I think, in the tinkering part of his phase, going like, listen, we got a whole bunch of games. It's the summer. I'm going to be rotating guys in. What are some ways that I can rotate guys in and still make things work tactically? And I think you're going to have games where you're going to have, Caicedo getting the ball 30 yards back to goal and just playing out with his wingers. Whoever's on the wing. Could be Bou, could be Gil, could be Teal, could be Pania. Whoever is out there, doesn't matter. He's going to be able to combine with them. And maybe you use him kind of as a different version of like a point guard. It's like, listen, we don't need you to score. We need you to set up the guy who's going to set up the other guy. And then if that all goes wrong, you can clean up the mess. The goal that Carlos Gil scored is basically the same version where, it was Caicedo who got in, had the ball, didn't really collect it for the shot, but battled long enough for Gil to just clean up the mess. I think those are the type of plays that Caicedo is going to be involved in and the goals that he's going to finish off. And that's still something that New England really doesn't have that kind of a poacher. Teal did that a little bit last year, but those are mostly back post finishes and breakaway type things. There isn't really someone who's going to get into the box and score those like Wondolowski poacher goals where it's like, listen, the ball's bouncing, I got to it first, I kicked it in the back of the net. New England's going to need a lot of those if they're going to continue this run up the table, and I think Caicedo's going to help in that department tremendously.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys, and I think that's what made Wednesday's performance a little shocking, is because Caicedo usually finishes off those chances. Mm-hmm. So, I do think we see a little bit more of him, and Seth, I do think we see more than 5 goals from Caicedo by the end of the season. But for now, he's still stuck on 4, and as I said, there's so many offensive options. Maybe he comes off the bench in the next couple. So,
do we have how many double-digit goal scorers could the Revs legitimately have this year?
This year?
Yeah, could they get to 3 double-digit goal scorers?
Well, Heel has 7, so he's 1. Bunbury
Teal has
5?
Teal's got 5.
Okay, I'd put Teal on there.
So do we think that...
Caicedo won't get there. I don't think Caicedo is... I honestly don't think he's that quality overall, but I think that he brings a skill set that can be really useful with a bunch of players who want the ball at the feet and can, move into different spaces and combine really well. And so I don't think he'll get there by any means, but I think there's still a value there for him.
But Teal needs 5 more goals. JFC would need 6. Pania and Aguilera would need 7, and Bou would need 9 to the end of the year if we assume Gil gets double digits. But the fact that we can actually think, well, can all these guys, or can a handful of these guys get to 10 goals? And we don't know if the Revs do still need that one top goal scorer. Maybe they can still do it by committee if, JFC's adding another 5 assists, if Pania gets to double-digit assists, if Gil gets to 15 assists. If everyone's contributing on the score sheet, and it doesn't matter if it's a goal or an assist, that's where I think the Revs are going to be dangerous if they do make the playoffs.
Yeah, I just think there's too many goals to be spread around that I don't think a lot of people will hit double digits. Even Teal, I'm kind of iffy on. I think Carlos Gil is the only one that I am 100% set on the rest of the way. So, and I don't know how many games are left, but we're past the halfway point, I believe. So, someone would have to go on a real big tear. Bou would have to go on a tear, or maybe Christian Pania finds his touch.
You'd have 12 games left. Yeah, 12 games left. So Bou would be scoring 9 times in 12 games. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but that would be very.
It's a tough ask.
Very, very tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see Teal making it either. I think Teal's so streaky. Just out of the list, though, Antonio De La Mea only needs 8 more goals to get to 10, so just saying.
well, when he has Powell marking him, maybe he would get to 10 goals. But, let's move on to some listener questions real quick. Randy LH asks us about Zahibo's performance. I just want to throw out some stats about it. And we're talking about the Cincinnati game since he was not playing on Wednesday, but he was 49 for 58 passing. That's 85%. 56 of those passes were classified as short, but he wasn't dispossessed at all. He held possession the entire game. He had 7 ball recoveries, 8 for 16 passing in the attacking third, 3 for 3 on tackles, 1 clearance, and 2 for 2 on aerial duels. Guys, Sean and I talked a few weeks ago about Zahibo and his improvement under Bruce Arena. Give me your assessment on Wilfred Zahibo, and do you think he's going to keep it up? Let's start with Seth. Sorry, I need to direct. I'm so used to just talking to Sean. I'm sorry, guys. I'm terrible.
Yeah, I'm happy with him. I mean, he's been doing well. The thing about him, he's always had impressive size, and that was one of the first things that Bruce Arena said in his first home press conference after the game. He goes, this guy has great size. He should be, using that Bruce Arena snark, saying he should be winning more tackles given his size. And I think that he's stepped up. I think that he's taken that to heart, and he's starting to win those aerial duels much more, because I made a point in the next game to watch it, and he wasn't winning headers in the midfield. If to be a guy that's a defensive midfielder that has that size, he should be winning every single one of those 50-50s and making them his own. So I think he's stepped up with that. He's worked better with his positioning. I think another thing that Reno likes about him is that he can hit that diagonal ball. I think you want him to be a little bit more accurate with that. I don't think it's working as well as you'd hope. It's not Jermaine Jones back in the day. But if he can hone that in, that's a really great weapon, because when you have Agudelo or you have Fagundes, or ideally you have Luis Caicedo in there, who's absolutely massive. He has such passion, such art, and plus he tucks his shirt in. Don't you love a defensive midfielder who tucks his shirt in? So if somebody pulls it out, he can point to it and say, "Dude, it's a foul! Look, he pulled my shirt out." So prop to him for going old school and tucking the shirt in. But with Zahibo, those other players around him are all about those little passes, click the ball, keep the ball moving, and he's supposed to be the one to hit that diagonal ball that can unlock the defense. And he's just not as sharp as you might like with that. That having been said, I mean, he can do it. He has the range for it. He just has to be a little bit more accurate with it. So, yeah, I mean, he's played well, better under Arena like everyone else on the Revolution, and that's a positive for the team.
Yeah, I think when you go and you look at the passing chalkboards for Luis Caicedo and Zahibo, you pretty much see the only difference is that Luis Caicedo is getting key passes from those diagonal balls, and Zahibo isn't. And a lot of Zahibo's diagonals are very straight, very upfield, and towards the middle, whereas a lot of Caicedo's are out to the wings. And I think if Zahibo refines that, puts more balls diagonally to the sideline, because the ones that went to the sideline, a lot of those were completed, and usually down the left-hand side. I think it was very strange having seen him paired with Diego. Diego wasn't really there to recover the ball or recycle or things like that. That was Zahibo's job. So Zahibo was really the guy who, listen, I'm getting the ball back. It's either going diagonally up the field or it's going to Diego or someone else who's short, and then we'll begin the break and begin our possession. But like I said, I find it amazing that all the combinations that have worked, I looked at Diego Fagundes and Wilfred Zahibo as a holding midfield combo and just went, no, there's no way. There's no way this is going to work. And then you watch it happen, and Diego had like a 90% day passing, and Zahibo was solid, not spectacular, but he was solid. And you're just like, you know what? Maybe Bruce knows what he's doing. Maybe we were right. Maybe we did believe in the right guy.
I just want to kind of touch upon, because I'm going to skip ahead to another question. Mike Kennedy asked us thoughts on Fagundes' performance in a new role. So I'm on the backs of your comments about Diego, I'm going to turn this over to Seth. First, I'll throw out those numbers because he didn't mention 90% passing. Fagundes was 39 for 43 passing. Again, the majority of those were short passes, or classified as short. 41 of those were short passes. But he was 6 for 8 in the attacking third. He had 2 ball recoveries, no dispossessions, so neither central midfielder was dispossessed in this game. Fagundes also 1 for 2 on tackles, and he committed 3 fouls, all in the defensive third. So, Seth, what did you think of Diego's new role yesterday, and how do you think he did?
Yeah, he did well. I mean, he named all the stats that show that he was solid in that position. That haven't been said. I think we have to remember that Cincinnati, they were playing a rookie number 10. They were playing Amaya, and that's not much of a challenge to go against. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the most challenging game for the Revolution, especially in the middle of the park. The best chances I thought for Cincinnati were coming from the wings because we see this a few times. The Revolution are most vulnerable because they're playing a lot of their wingers more narrow so they can combine off each other. So whether it's Heel coming in or Bou coming in, they're playing a little bit more narrow, which allows for those left and right back to overlap. And we saw that a lot with Bai. Bai was getting forward a ton. So teams adjust by, getting their attackers to play a little bit wider and try to exploit those areas. We saw that with when they played against Houston. We saw that against Vancouver. We saw that against Cincinnati. Like, those teams were trying to exploit those spaces, which then pinned back our left and right back. Luckily, we have enough talent to attack in other ways and make things happen in other ways. But it wasn't happening in the middle of the field. I mean, the Revs had the numerical advantage in the middle of the field to dominate those types of opportunities. And there wasn't enough creativity in that middle of the field with Cincinnati to really judge how good Fagundes would be in that role. And I feel like that for both Fagundes and Agudelo, that they're not necessarily always being challenged a ton. They're doing a good job at what they're doing, but they're not facing the elite teams that have those attacking presence in the middle and that you have to really track all the time because they're getting into those spaces. There's really talented number 10s that move all the time, and if you're not paying attention to them in that split second, they punish you and do something dangerous. Because I think with Agudelo and Fagundes, we see that they're not necessarily the best tacklers. When Agudelo played that role, there was a time where he was in the box, it was a corner kick, and he pulled a player down, and it could have been a penalty. I think they were both, Johnstone, they were both fighting, but Agudelo, and I think Fagundes as well, don't always have that mindset of, I have to watch where I am because now I'm further back, and if I foul someone, it's going to be in a dangerous position. Fagundes, at one point, he tackles someone, and that foul is right outside the 18. That's a pretty dangerous foul to give. Versus earlier, Agudelo and Fagundes, they're usually so much higher up the field that if they commit a foul, it's not that big of a deal. So they have to be a little bit more careful, I think, when they're tackling. That said, they're both doing fine in that position. Agudelo and Fagundes have the skill set to move the ball quickly. And I think that's what you want. I think that's what they're being asked to do. They're not necessarily being asked to be an enforcer, to be a tackler. At times they're going to be if they're going to be facing really talented lineups. But my guess is that maybe those aren't going to be the times that you put those guys in the middle. Maybe those are the times that Luis Caicedo and Zahibo are the guys that are patrolling that in front of that back line.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. I think Caicedo and Zahibo is the kind of starting line, holding midfielder line there. I do think it's a pretty big, take this with a grain of salt, that Juan Agudelo was up against a depleted Whitecaps team. There was no Freddie Montero, and I think they completed something like 7 passes in the attacking third in the first half of that game. There was really no offense or even any effort from the Whitecaps to generate any offense until they were down 1-0. And then Cincinnati, too, as you said, is not exactly the best team. You mentioned Amaya. He might be their best player. They really have a lot of problems right now across that field. So, I take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but it is good to know that Diego Fagundes can go back there, hold possession, and kind of mesh with the team. And should be noted, first goal of the season on Wednesday, kind of put that game away, made it 2-0 in the late stages, which, Jake, I know you talked about that game. That was probably the closest 4-0 game you'll ever watch. Yeah. At one point, the Whitecaps hit the post when they were only up 1-0, so he kind of put that one away. So really positive week for Diego. It looks like he's going to be making the occasional spot start somewhere around the field and kind of fill in, so it's good to see him get a little bit of confidence back. Cameron Young asks us, what would be the ideal lineup after a pair of great performances, a lot of standout performances? And then Alex Welsh also says, flying so high, this team continues to do us proud. As of today, what do you guys think is our best possible starting 11? So Jake, I'm going to go to you. What is the best starting 11 from the Revs?
I can lock down pretty much 9 positions. Well, 9 players. Left back, I'm going to say, is a 50-50. That's going to keep as a platoon. I think the real combination is really how many true holding midfielders do you want on the field? What is that question? I think Teal is a starter. I think Bou is a starter. I think Gill is a starter up front. And then you sort of have this weird combination of like Pania, Fagundes, Caicedo, Zahibo and Scotty, who are playing for like one wing position and either two holding midfield positions or a center midfield position. If it were me, I actually think the Agudelo as center midfield concept right now is the best thing New England has. But the fact that they can pivot from, say, Diego on the wing to Diego as a holding midfielder and make that substitution now or that tactical change at halftime, having that like proverbial golf shot in the bag is now something else where I'm going to go like, well, against a team like Cincinnati, who I thought was really late in bringing on, who was the striker that came on? Darren Mannix. Darren Mannix came in at the 30-minute mark. I'm like, where was he the entire game? Because I didn't remember Fernando Adi doing anything in that game, and I thought that Mannix was the far more a better attacker, at least in the final third, far more influential. The fact that New England now, I think, is going to be able to have so many combinations either to start or to end, it's not so much that you have the right starting lineup. I think you have to have the right ending lineup of the game. And I think if Arena is consistently making good substitutions and good tactical changes when he needs to, that's where the Revs are going to be far more effective. I don't think you need to start the game with the best lineup. You sometimes might need to end the game with your best lineup.
Seth, what are your thoughts?
Turner in goal, Castillo left back. I like Jones, but I think Castillo is more accurate with the crossing. He actually does pretty decent, especially winning the ball higher up the field. I like Jones as an option because of his speed, because if you beat him once, you have to beat him twice. But I think you just got to have to ride out Castillo as the experienced guy as the first choice. In the middle, Delamea and Farrell. We'll see if Mancienne can come back and challenge for that position. If he can, you definitely move Farrell to right back and put Brandon Bye on the bench. But at this point, I mean, it's kind of working. So you put those guys there. You put Brandon Bye as right back. I'm not a big fan of Brandon Bye. I think that he's working really hard. I thought he was actually better with his crossing against Cincinnati, and I think the reason why is that you just put it low. I mean, that's what you want to do. Just put the ball in a spot where good things can happen. If you put it, low on the ground, you put it, below the shin, maybe it's an own goal. Maybe someone can kind of go there and hit it. When you put it in the air, it's just much more difficult to measure and to place it right. So I like the low crosses. He had two that Teal Bunbury should have finished. I mean, probably, Jay Casado being that poacher in the front. He probably finishes them, but, we'll talk about that again.
Can I just cut in real quick on Bye, though? 1 second?
Sure, yeah.
I really think Brandon Bye is a right midfielder because he can shoot and he can do those low crosses, but when he's playing in the back and he makes his way up, there's really no chance for him to fit a low cross in because at that point the defense has gotten back. He's not going to be able to outrun the defensive midfield back. It always seems like he's just pounding a low cross into the box. It's very frustrating because I'm glad you pointed that out about the low crossing because I think that is a big skill that Brandon Bye has, and when he has space to put it on Teal Bunbury's foot or JF Caicedo's foot, it's there, but it's very frustrating to see like a Vancouver Whitecaps game where in the first 10 minutes is Brandon Bye whipping in crosses through the air, which he's not great at, or doing low crosses that are, going nowhere against a team that's bunkering. It's very frustrating. I will say the one thing that I've learned about, or that I've looked into about why Brandon Bye is back there is he is pretty good in the air, and I think that's where they kind of value him. But everything else about your assessment about how Brandon Bye at right back is not really adding a whole lot, I agree with. So I just wanted to get those 2 quick points in there. Sorry, get to your midfield, Seth.
Yeah, so again, I think that Brandon Bye is just there out of necessity, and that if Mancienne can come back, I don't think Anibaba is the guy that comes in the middle, just because he's healthy right now and Farrell's still there. So anyway, midfield, I think it's Zahibo and Luis Casado right now. I think that they're working well together. You get a little bit of a height, and you get that just absolute guy who works all the effort in the world and covers space, and I think that Casado is being used better now because he's not being asked to go hunting all the way up the field. Like before with the high press, the guy had to go hunting everywhere because he was the one that put in the effort. Now he's just being told, just protect the back line, dude. And he can do that much more successfully. In front of them, for me right now, I would go with Carlos Gil. I think that like you want him in the middle collecting balls because he puts in that defensive work. You have a nice little triangle that works between the three of them. That's very hard to penetrate because Heel and Casado in particular are going to put in all the work that you need to get behind the ball and win that ball back as quickly as possible. So I like him in the middle. Right now, I'd probably go with Pania out left, Bou out right, and up top, probably Teal Bunbury because he's in form. Or if you want to hold up striker, you go with Casado. And with Bou, he would have all the freedom to come inside, much like we saw in the first game, especially in the first half, where he's just kind of floating and just finding spaces and going out wide if he wants to go out wide, but coming in. And I think for me, that freedom just to kind of start in the wing but come in is nice for him because it's harder to track. And I think that, granted, that's a lot of minutes for a new team, but I didn't think he looked as good in the second game playing below the striker. And it might have just been, a lot of minutes for a guy who just came in, or it might have been that it was just easier to track him in the middle versus if he's on the outside, he can kind of sneak in behind someone's back shoulder. He can cut in front of someone. He has a little bit, of options of how to play. That's what I'd go with right now. You could also put Bou on the right and Teal on the right. Bou on the left and Teal on the right, and put Casado up top, and then bring on Pania as a weapon off the bench. I think that, like Bruce Arena right now, we're just trying to figure things out. I think Bruce Arena, if you were to ask him right now on the podcast, he'd be like, I don't know. Like, how am I supposed to know after 1 week of having Bou in here what his best position is going to be? So I think it's going to be kind of fun to watch what happens over this next few weeks.
Yeah, he'd snap back and what do you think? He'd turn that question on me. That's not a question I'd ask Bruce Arena. You mentioned Edgar Castillo, and Jake, I noticed that you want a committee there at left back, so I'm going to lead into our next question here. Mohammed Hussein asks us, felt Castillo was poor. Do you think he's gone at the end of the season? And in his opinion, Jones is a better left back than Castillo, Jones is a better left back than Castillo if he plays more of it and learns the position. He thinks Jones will be a better left back than Castillo. Do you think he can be a serviceable left back instead of shopping for one and getting one in the transfer window? I don't know if you guys heard last week's episode, but we had like 7 questions about Edgar Castillo and how terrible he is. I missed the meeting where everyone decided that Edgar Castillo was the worst player in MLS. I'll go to you first, Seth. Do you think Edgar Castillo comes back to the Revs next season? And then 2, do you think that, you just said Edgar Castillo, with his experience, you'd start him over Jones, but do you think DeJuan Jones long-term is a left back?
So with coming back next season, it depends on his contract, right? He's in
$250,000. That's what he's making this season, and I don't know when it expires. I will say that he was on a 1-year loan with Colorado with a purchase at the end of the season. I don't know who spent the transfer fee to get him, but he was traded to New England, and somehow, someone activated the transfer clause. I assume it was Colorado, and kind of like a sign and trade type thing. But either way, he's making $250,000 to give you a kind of a measuring stick.
Yeah, and he's 32 years old. His birthday is in October. I would say if you can get out of the contract, you probably try to get out of the contract and you start rebuilding that back line the way you want it to look under Bruce Arena. Contracts are tricky, right? You look at Gabriel Somi. He lasted on this team for quite a while until they finally, mutually agreed to part ways. Zahibo was the same thing. A lot of people looked at Zahibo and they're like, we should get rid of him. Now, of course, he's doing all right now, but that was a contract that was guaranteed for the next year. So I don't know if Edgar Castillo has a guaranteed contract. If he does, I don't know who's going to pick up that contract per se around the league. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, you kind of need to start rebuilding that back line and give Arena the ability to do that. So I wouldn't bring him back next year if that's a possibility. For Jones, Jones is quick. Jones has some ability. What I like about Jones is that you can tell that he's confident. If you listen to any interview with Jones, he has that confidence of this is who I am. Watch me do my thing, and I'm going to continue to grow as a player. And I think you want that confidence in a player. Is he a left back? Maybe. That might be his best role, especially in a league where you start bringing in a lot of attacking talent from other places. If you're an athletic player, you could play left or right back. you might have a longer career in this league. I mean, you think about how long Donnie Smith lasted in this team because he converted to an outside back. You think about Brandon Bye probably getting more minutes than he would have gotten by moving to right back. So it might be a better plan for his long-term development and to stay in MLS to play as a left or right back. But I'm not necessarily sure if he'll ever hit the heights of an MLS All-Star or best 11 type of player playing that position.
Jake, what are your thoughts on the left back controversy?
I think Edgar Castillo is another guy where I look and I say, listen, I don't hate Edgar Castillo. I might hate his contract. If Edgar Castillo and DeJuan Jones next year are still the platooned left back of the New England Revolution, that's still a better thing than what we had in 2018, which was a dismal freaking mess. And I'm okay with that. There's only so much money you can throw at every position. At some point, you have to pick and choose a spot that is going to be, listen, I got an MLS vet and I got a first-round rookie. I'm spending maybe a little over $300,000 at that spot for the entire roster. You know what? Perfectly fine. I think both guys are fine. If you want to ride the hot hand, you want to platoon them, make sure that everyone's rested. Maybe you ride, Edgar for certain matchups against more veteran teams. Maybe against the bad teams, you let Jones and his speed, cause trouble. I also don't have a problem if you're subbing them off, 70 minutes, 20 minutes at the end. I'm perfectly okay with whatever scenario that we can think of. Before the season, or not so much before the season, in the middle of the season when the team was bad and Edgar Castillo was getting burned because, we didn't know these things called tactics because Brad Friedel, yes, it certainly seemed a lot worse. But Edgar Castillo is probably one of the other players that's benefited a lot because he probably knows Bruce Arena. He probably got at least some minutes, not so much with the U.S. national team, but Bruce Arena being far more familiar with him and the U.S. team setup and can figure out ways how to make him effective. And in theory, pass that knowledge along to Jones. I'd be perfectly fine if Castillo is back next year. But unless you're going to go and make a killer signing that would be in the TAM range, then you'd have to probably let Edgar Castillo go.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I mean, anytime Edgar Castillo is in the lineup, I don't know if you look at the Revs mentions, I mean, people are outraged. And last week we had a question if Castillo was as bad as Somi. I think Sean and I are a little nicer to Castillo than a lot of Revs Twitter. So I'm just going to throw out a couple stats to kind of make the argument that Castillo is, I would say, at very least on par with DeJuan Jones. I have not seen enough to definitively say DeJuan Jones is a better left back than Edgar Castillo. So here's my statistical defense. Tackles, Edgar Castillo is 53 for 84 this season. That's 63.1%. Not great for a left back. I'm not saying he's a great defensive player. For comparison, Brandon Bye is 32 for 46 at 69.6%. DeJuan Jones is 9 for 23 at 39%. Interceptions, Castillo 1.7 per 90 minutes. That's tied for the team lead. Obviously, he intercepts a lot of passes in the attacking half. Bye and Jones are at 1.2. Clearances, Castillo 1.5, Jones 1.3. Brandon Bye has 3 clearances per 90 minutes. And then pass completion, Castillo is 72.4%, Jones 73.4%, and Bye is at 66.7%. So statistically, I feel like Castillo and Jones are a little bit comparable. I understand that Castillo did get burned a lot. As you said, Jake, at the beginning of the season, I think that was more Friedel's tactics than anything else. And I will say that the 2 biggest chances from the Whitecaps on Wednesday came when DeJuan Jones was left one-on-one and there was a low cross across through the box. So I agree with you guys. I don't think Edgar Castillo is coming back. If there's an option at $250,000, I don't think that option is exercised. Maybe he comes back on a smaller salary. He is getting up there a little bit in age. But if it's a guaranteed salary, he might be coming back, and maybe he's going to be kind of put into a rotational piece. And I think DeJuan Jones is certainly very athletic, and I would say kind of push him up to the wing. But they have so much depth there. I'm not totally sure what the long-term story.
I think you would address, if you're going to leave Andrew Farrell at center back, you would address right back and a starter above Bye. Then you would go and find a left back first. Your left back situation right now is not awful. If Brandon Bye is your starting right back and Andrew Farrell is starting center back, your right back situation is a problem in the grand scheme of things on the roster.
I'm looking forward to the feedback on us, our semi-defensive Castillo. It's a very dangerous. It's David Price territory for Revs fans.
I'm surprised that I think that before the show started, Greg, you were saying that Castillo should be at the All-Star game, right?
I mean, I can make a argument for it. I mean, he can cross a ball.
Are there any fullbacks on the MLS All-Star roster? Did they? I thought fullbacks weren't allowed. I thought it was only center backs.
Maybe they're like the Revs and they just take wingers and they put them back at fullback. I'm not sure.
I bet Wayne Rooney can play fullback just fine. Just gonna throw that out there.
I did find it interesting, too, that the Revs' strategy was to get wingbacks crossing the ball, and they had Edgar Castillo on the bench on Wednesday. I mean, talk about the one thing Edgar Castillo can do better. Oh, my goodness. And it is interesting, too, that there's so much hate, and, on the 4th of July, Edgar Castillo had his best game of the season. So, I don't know. I'm not as harsh on him as a lot of people, but moving along here, Zachary Grimes asks us, realistically, what are now the goals of the team? Getting a high seed is what I think has to be the goal. Christopher Velikis says, I'm loving the streak, but I find myself wondering what is the ceiling for this group. And then Bent Musket Matt, one of your writers over there, Seth, for the Bent Musket, says, how many points do you project for the team? He says if there's not numbers, if you don't want to give a number, because that involves math, and we're not math guys. Give a best case scenario in terms of seeding. Oh, maybe you are a math guy, Jake. Jeez, I can't do math in my head. I don't even know how many games are left.
No, I was told there would be no math. No,
Well, let's go here, Jake. I'll start with you. What do you think is what are your goals and what is your best case scenario for the team? And I'll preface this by saying that 538 gives the Revs a 49% chance of making the playoffs as of right now. So
I want to say a month ago when we started having like the initial, how the heck do the Revs make the playoffs? There were two options. Pretty much do what they're doing now, which is never lose. Or, and this also happened, we need a team to drop back to the pack. Now, that ended up being Montreal, which we thought was going to happen without Piatti. They were eventually going to get him back. However, on points per game right now, the Revolution are in 6th in the conference. They have a game in hand on Montreal. They're tied on points. I still don't see points per game right now, New England getting up into like I think like DC and New York at like 1.5 kind of sort of range. I think that would be an obtainable goal, and that gets you a playoff spot. Do I think it gets you a home game in the East? No. I still think the best spot you're looking at, like, listen, you're in the playoffs, but you're going on the road. If New England does get up as high as the 4th seed, which is, again, not unobtainable, they're only 4 points behind the Red Bulls right now. They're in 4th, just not on points per game, just on points. That would be something where, would you take the Red Bulls at home in a 4-5 game in the East in the first round from where they were 2 months ago? Hell, I'd take the 7th seed against Atlanta just because we're there. But now as New England continues this unbeaten run and the playoffs go from more of a long shot pipe dream to no, maybe this is actually going to be a thing, and not only are the Revolution going to be in the playoffs, the Revolution are going to be a problem in the playoffs, because this is a different team that started the year considerably. And I think the more New England goes up the standings, the more you look at, doesn't matter who they're playing or where they're playing, it's going to be, this is a problem for whoever is in front of us. And I didn't think that was going to be something that would happen this year. Maybe an outside chance that happens in 2020, but you're really looking, 2-3 years down the road in the Bruce Arena timeline of, okay, the Revs are here, and the Revs are here to not just be in the playoffs, but to be in the Eastern Conference Final and to be, competing for MLS Cup, if that was the goal of the turnaround. The fact that we're probably a year early on this conversation is a tremendous positive.
Yeah, I think that you're probably looking at best case scenario, grabbing like 6 or 7 seed, making some noise in the playoffs, getting fans excited so that they renew their season tickets for next year, and then just evaluating the roster and letting Bruce Arena have his own team next year and hopefully making that the year. Do they make the playoffs? I think right now they have a good chance of being a 7 seed and maybe doing something in the playoffs. But I could also see a situation where they fall just a little bit short, and that would be okay. I mean, I think that Arena was dealt a pretty bad hand here, and that's what he's going to be working with.
Yeah, I think the goals right now is maybe a 5-ish seed. I don't know how much more we talked about this a little bit last week about who we see dropping. The Revs would have to kind of keep up their pace to get a home playoff game, and that's possible. But right now, realistically, I'm looking at 5-6 seed as the goal. So, Seth, any thoughts on that?
No, I'm all set.
Oh, okay. This is what happens when you mess in the Skype chat, Seth.
Yeah, for those at home that can't see, I just said let me mention Larry Jackson in the Skype chat, which I had no intention of actually doing.
Christopher Valukas also says, hopefully I'm not butchering that name horribly, but sorry, Chris, if that's the case. Also, if a second player is coming this window, would it be more wise for Bruce to bring in a depth piece over a surefire starter? Seth, I'll come to you in a second, but I wanted to also preface this by saying that Arena has kind of hinted that it's probably not going to be a designated player. If there is going to be a designated player, kind of expect one in the offseason, not so much this window. So he's kind of tipped his hand that even though they're looking to bring in some players, it might not be a big acquisition. But do you think that is the correct call to make?
Yeah, I think that was great that Bou came in. That was someone that he scouted and knew ahead of time that he was going to be a difference maker in this league and got that deal done very, very quickly. I think at this point it'd be great if Bruce Arena can get a trade within MLS. Think about trading a player for a center back or a right back or a left back who is an MLS known commodity, maybe someone that Arena already knows, and that can contribute some minutes down the stretch right here. That's what I really expect for the rest of the season, which I'm totally okay with because we've seen way too many times a Mancienne or a Dielna or even a Nemeth, who's I think a pretty good player, just never really fitting here. Or on the worst side of things, Machado or a Hache come in and not really have any talent. They all can't be Larry Jacksons, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'm with Seth. I think all you need right now is either a trade for a depth piece, probably on the back line. For me, I would look at figuring out a way how to either improve a direct right back, and have Brandon By come off the bench, or find another center back, so that you can put Farrell back in his normal spot. Those are really the only two positions I think you'd be looking at. It's either going to be a right back or a center back. Maybe you can find another utility player similar to Anababa and just sort of say, like, listen, this is what we have. This is our back line, and it's still 1,000 times better than what it was at the start of the year, just because they know how to play soccer again. So.
Yeah, and I know I've answered this question a few weeks ago when we talked about Thomas Vermaelen, and we said, if you bring in a third DP now, you've committed to Heel multiple years, you've committed to Bou multiple years. So if you bring in another DP, even if it's for 2 years, you're really restricting yourself in terms of flexibility. I certainly don't think a DP signing is wise at this point. I think they can kind of tweak their weaknesses, which is along the back line, through trades in MLS, or there are some other ways to kind of go about fixing the last few pieces. I don't think a big splash signing is necessary. It would be great as a selfish short-term thing, but I don't think it's really necessary. Bou is the GOAT asks us, do you think Teal's confidence will still be up despite not scoring in this game? I thought he was fantastic. And I'll tackle this one first. You guys can jump in if you disagree with me, but I think he answered his own question there. Teal had a really good game, hit the bar, forced a really nice save from the Cincinnati keeper. He did have that one play at the beginning where, Seth, you referenced this play earlier, By had a low cross through the 6-yard box. Teal kind of touched it, got a tip on it, but he didn't get all of it, and it kind of skirted off his foot and out of bounds. But he was still very dangerous. He still had some big chances in that game. I don't see any reason why his confidence would be down. Any disagreements?
No, I think he's fine. You're going to continue to start him, and then if he goes through a big stretch, then you put him on the bench. But I think his confidence will be fine.
Paul Gerard asks us, the Revs didn't concede any goals in the last 15 minutes in either game, but they did look suspect at times. How can they fix this? Jake, I'll go with you. Any tweaks in the last 15 minutes that you want to see?
No, I just, I think I said earlier during the Cincinnati game, like I actually like both subs from Marina. Maybe timing a smidge earlier, but Diego was playing so well it doesn't matter. I look at this is the other sort of growing pain of this is the team that has struggled to close out games for a number of reasons, most of them probably tactically, and now I think Bruce Arena just needs to give them the confidence, just keep playing soccer. That's how you closed out Vancouver. You kept playing soccer, and eventually the final 10 minutes, you willed them down. You scored not once, but 3 times. Cincinnati, they did the plan a little bit better. I would have preferred a third goal, but Cincinnati was so lackluster, it was fine. This is a team that needs to discover how to close out games. You start doing it against bad teams, then you start doing it against mediocre teams. Now you can start doing it against good teams and consistently get points in this league.
Yeah, I agree. Keep playing soccer. I think especially late in the game, oftentimes if a team is down a goal, they try to use the wide areas to throw in crosses. But with the Revolution having so many attackers, if you continue to play soccer higher up the field, that's going to pin back the left and right back, which is going to prevent them from getting forward and whipping in those crosses. So I feel more confident about the Revolution team when they're in the attacking third as opposed to like sitting all the way back and trying to get into a defensive shell. So keep playing soccer and score some goals.
And Seth, I'll go to you too. This is another end game kind of situation, but the Revs did not use a third sub. Dave Aikman wants to know why no third sub against Cincinnati.
I mean, it worked, right? I mean, I'm not exactly sure why we didn't see another sub. It's just kind of Bruce Arena thinking about who he wants to put on that given day. So I'm looking at the substitutions right now. You have Brad Knight, which is probably not going to come into the game for Matt Turner. Just can't imagine that. Jalil Anibaba is an interesting one. Yeah, we have seen him come in late in games and going to a 5-man back line. I kind of like that move because he is kind of an emergency defender who can block shots and put his body on the line. So that's a possibility right there. But as Jake mentioned, we want to see the Revs play soccer, and go at them other teams. So do you really want to bring in another center back and kind of see things out that way? Maybe not. DeJuan Jones, maybe bring him on for pace, but he's been playing more of a left back. So probably not him. Justin Rennicks or Tajon Buchanan, those are probably the guys you might want to bring on and say, dude, go out there for 5 minutes and just run at people and make things happen. Maybe you bring one of those guys on for a player. Christian Pinilla goes all 90. Teal Bunbury goes all 90. So, yeah, I would maybe see Rennicks or Buchanan being young guys that we can kind of see how they do in those given moments. But I think maybe on the road you want to go with some experienced guys that are going to see things out and make sure there's no drama in those late 15 minutes or whatnot.
Yeah, I think these particular 2 games, because you're playing twice midweek, and the weather was not exactly fun, at least definitely for the New England game at home. Yeah, you want to use that third sub just to get someone off the field for just 10 minutes. I think Seth hit it right on the head. You tell Rennicks or Buchanan, listen, just go in for Pinilla, go in on the wing, go in at top, and just go find the ball. If the ball's in the attacking half, go find it. Go piss someone off for 6 minutes or 10 minutes and do that. We've seen, I think Buchanan in particular, be very effective at that. And this would have been a perfect game, I think, to use him in that spot, just to save the legs of either a Bunbury or a Pinilla or a Gill. And I was surprised that Bo started this game because, coming in, played midweek. I would have kept him on the bench and brought him on if you needed him. For the Cincinnati game, Caicedo came in and closed out. I think did really well. Scott Caldwell, if he's going to be the closer, that's great. I wish we can get him to start, but I have no problem. Scott Caldwell is playing 15, 20 minutes and completing 95% of his passes at the end of the game and keeping the pace slow and everything else working. So that could be a perfect role for him. And I think we're going to find other roles for guys if they're not starting, what role they have off the bench given the game situations.
Yeah, I just don't think there was a sub to kind of come in, unless it was someone to save legs. But defensively, I don't think there was a whole lot Bruce could use the bench for to kind of shift pieces around. So moving on. Jake, this one's coming to you. I don't think Seth has any input. I certainly don't have any input. So this is all you, Jake. And we were actually talking about this unrelated before you even knew this question was coming. But Craft Soap Connoisseur wants to know, Magic the Gathering or Dungeons and Dragons?
I will say this. I do not hate Magic the Gathering. I, in fact, attempted to play Hearthstone a couple of years ago. I am just not physically capable or creative enough to build a deck. If you give me the deck and tell me how to play it, that's perfectly fine. Give me a D&D character. Let me mess with it. I'm trying to mess with one right now, a fighter necromancer combo. It's not working out well. Why? The same reason I can't build a deck. I'm not good at these things. You give me something and tell me how to use it, I'm actually a lot better. That's how my brain works. But D&D all the way. Shout out Hawkwood Games, Milford, Connecticut. Elm City Games, New Haven, Connecticut.
Can we go back to talking soccer?
Yeah, we can go back to talking soccer. And on that Elm City Express, I believe they were the 2016 or 2017 national NPSL champions, Jake?
That would be 2017. I have the jersey in my closet.
There you go. I knew he knew off the top of his head. Gustavo Bou is the best striker, asks us, will the Revs ever lose again? Seth, yes, no. Are the Revs ever going to lose again in the history of their existence?
Don't you guys feel bad for people that just became Revs fans and they're just like, I actually don't feel bad for them, but like they're just like, wow, this team's amazing. Like I don't understand why they don't have a downtown stadium, and then you have to tell about all the championships they've lost and all the different situations and the era that was Brad Friedel. The poor little kids that are just seeing not going through all the heartache that we have seen year after year. Will the Revs ever lose again? Maybe. Who knows? Tune in next week.
Jake, yes, no. Are they ever going to lose again?
I mean, there is still somewhere. There are 7 and 8-year-olds who have never seen the UConn women lose an American Athletic Conference basketball game. It's entirely possible that New England will never lose a game again. It's also entirely possible they're going to lose out the rest of the year. MLS is dumb. The rules are made up, and the points at the end of the day technically don't matter, but we have playoffs and stuff anyway. No, I have no idea. Listen, this has been a tremendously fun ride. The first 2 months added about 10 years to all of our lives, and we're now trying to slowly recoup that back as the Bruce Arena era begins. And just listen, as long as this season lasts, as long as this wave lasts, let's just enjoy it.
And I will say I was going to twist it into a alternative question, a serious question of who will lose next, the Patriots or the Revs. But they have at Seattle on August 10th, at New York Red Bulls August 17th. I think those will be 2 difficult games if they make it past LAFC, which I think there's a decent chance. It's a home game. It's a cross-country game for LAFC. I think the Revs will give them a bit of a battle.
That'll be a very fun litmus test. I think it's in a few weeks, right?
Yeah, 2 weeks from now.
Oh yeah, that might be a fun litmus test to figure out where this team is.
Yeah, and they'll lose 4-0 now that I've overlooked Orlando FC. We did get one last quick listener question. This is from Sean Donahue. Is Carles Gil going to need a rest at some point? Guy has basically played every minute for the Revs and hasn't had time off since last July, going right from playing competitive games in Spain to Revs preseason. You guys worried about resting Carles Gil, or is Sean just being paranoid? I'll go to you first, Jake.
I don't think that Sean's being paranoid. I think, yes, at some point you're going to have to give him a few minutes off, at least. I know he started every single game. I think he's only been subbed off something like twice. But yeah, no, I mean, at some point, yes, he's going to need a break, whether that's maybe Diego with a spot start in the middle, maybe Agudelo a spot start at the 10. The Revolution are in a far more comfortable place now where I could say, listen, yes, Carles Gil in a home game against someone terrible, keep him on the bench, use him only in emergencies, and maybe that's twice for the rest of the year. Maybe he only starts 10 out of the remaining 12 games, and that again, perfectly fine. If you think this is an actual playoff team, you're going to need Carles Gil in the playoffs, you're going to need Gustavo Bou in the playoffs, you're going to need Pinilla and Bunbury and everyone healthy in the playoffs to compete. So yeah, I would not have a problem if Gil gets a significant breather at some point during this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also just add, though, that I think that Gil is the type of player who wants to be on the field all the time. He wears the captain armband now. If you follow him on Instagram, he's always taking those pictures after the game, saying how much he believes in the team. So I think he wants to be on the field as much as possible. It'll probably be Bruce Arena who has to sit him down and say, dude, why don't you take this one off?
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. I think you might sit 1 or 2 games down the stretch, but the Revs are in the playoff battle, so I think they're going to ride him out. He's going to have to suit up, and he doesn't seem to ever slow down. So he seems pretty durable. He's out there. He runs the most. He seems to get the most touches in almost every game. No. So,
well, I mean, it sounds silly, but I mean, listen, this Saturday, home in Orlando on a crummy field, grass on top of turf. might not be a bad time to test out that theory and give a few guys a break.
They're going to lose 3-0 now that I've jinxed them anyway, so that's not a bad idea.
Orlando is pants, and they know it.
Let's. We're almost at 90 minutes. I said this was going to be an hour. I'm going over again. It's just so much fun talking about the Revs and Larry Jackson. But Seth, do you have any shout-outs or final thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, quick shout-out. Larry Jackson is celebrating the 1-week anniversary of being named as the assistant coach of the Oakland Roots. He's also in contention to have some minutes in goal. So big congratulations to Larry Jackson, friend of the pod, for his new role.
Jake, you want to try to follow that one up?
Do we have to buy him a jersey now and figure out how to get it signed? Because I feel like this is becoming a little overboard.
I mean, yeah,
and I'm the guy who talks
this is
UConn
not on your level of UConn women basketball. Though.
No, it's not. I mean, that's what I mean. Even I think this is starting to be excessive.
I just want everyone who listens to this podcast to tweet, send fan mail, whatever it is, to Larry Jackson and let him know how often he was mentioned in this podcast. And I think that would make my life as a journalist complete.
You know, we haven't, since we've rebooted Revolution Recap, we haven't done any player interviews. So, I mean, if people actually tweet or send mail to Larry Jackson, at a little PS, you should go on Revolution Recap. I'll wrap it up. I'm going to go off soccer really quick in my final thoughts. Yesterday, I'm a day late on this one, but yesterday marked the 30th anniversary of a true classic in cinema, comedic genius, one of the greatest movies of all time, and certainly of my youth. I am, of course, talking about UHF, starring Weird Al Yankovic and Victoria Jackson, and pre-Kramer Michael Richards. If you have not seen it, I recommend it. It is a cult classic, and you will be quoting the Spatula City commercial for years to come. Guys, give us their Twitter handle. Jake, I'll start with you.
At jcatanese43, you can find myself and Seth at the Bent Musket and bentmusket.com. I went on vacation last week, and I sort of didn't finish up my Gold Cup stuff. I might do that this week if I'm not sleeping all day. I haven't figured that out yet.
SethMan31. Please follow me.
And you can follow us on Twitter at Revolution Recap. And I wish I had Larry Jackson's Twitter account. I don't. You guys will have to do that one on your own.
Listen, if Seth doesn't have it right now, I'm going to be upset.
And he definitely Googled Larry Jackson in the middle of this podcast.
I think that you'd have to go through the Oakland Roots. I honestly believe that someone needs to hunt down Larry Jackson for me. And we can get an interview with him on the podcast. So that's my call for you guys, because he's not on Twitter. So find a way to get Larry Jackson.
That's the homework for the listeners this week. So, and also your homework is to follow us on Twitter at Revolution Recap, and also follow the Bent Musket on Twitter. I think at the Bent Musket. I'm not so sure, but maybe. Sure. Okay. And also like our Revolution Recap page on Facebook. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes. We haven't gotten one of those in a while, so just saying. Come on, guys. Pick it up. Or wherever you're listening, of course, if you don't have iTunes. The Revs look to pull a Spinal Tap next week and turn their unbeaten streak to 11 as they host Orlando City at home, as previously mentioned. We have a bye week next weekend, but we'll be back with a new episode after the LAFC game in 2 weeks. Until then, thank you, everyone, for listening, and go Revs.